Dansville Area Historical Society for this evening's Dogwood Festival program. For those of you who are in the back, you may miss quite a bit by being that far away from the stage, so if the mood strikes you, come on up front. There's about 48 seats right in the first 4 rows. This is our contribution to the Dogwood program. It's all week long in the Dansville area, as you probably well know. If you haven't taken a look, take a look at Main Street. Those flower beds look quite nice this year. There's been a lot of work put into them, and if we can keep the kids out of them until next week, they'll look pretty good over the weekend too. One of the things we have for you outside is we have copies of our latest newsletters. They're available out there at the desk. We also have some samples of our collectibles, the latest one being the museum itself. And of course, the one before that is the middle school. So those are available after the concert for your enjoyment and purchase if you so desire. And we will be active all weekend. The museum will be open both Saturday and Sunday if you want to go in and take a look around. There's a lot of things in there, and there's 3 floors worth. You just can't do it in 10 minutes. Some people have tried. You just about get up and down the stairs in that time. So please take advantage of that, and we'll have a booth at the Dogwood Festival, flea market, and in Church Park. And the weatherman's promising sunny, right? Saturday, so far. So it's better than yesterday, and not better than yesterday. Like yesterday would have been fine. Today wouldn't have been so good. So we'll look forward to seeing you at some of those activities also. Our Rosa membership chairman, Rosa, said I had to tell you that there are membership forms available in the back, and that's Rosa. If you're interested later on in joining our society, we certainly would be happy to have you. At this point, I'd like to introduce our program chairman, which is Alice Burdick, which had an awful lot to do with getting tonight's program together. And we'll have her introduce the program.
Okay, I guess I can be heard. Well, tonight we're really lucky to have 2 professors from SUNY Geneseo with us. And the first one is Jim Kimball, and Jim is a professor of music, and he's an ethnomusicologist, and he'll have to explain to you what that is, and I'm not sure that I even have it. He says no. So anyway, whatever it is, he knows a lot about the area music that he has researched, and he's going to sort of tell us about a lot of the songs that are familiar to us and music that has been played around the area for a number of years, 100 years or more. And Jim also has been researching the original instruments that these things were played upon and danced to and whatever. And he also is responsible for the Geneseo String Band, which many of you know, and they do square dances, and Jim has also learned to do square dance calling. So he's a multi-talented person. The other person that we're very happy to have here is Dr. Bill Cook, and he has done the history of Livingston County that you all are familiar with, that he has just written and published during the past year. And all of us that have read the book and have the book have been really fascinated reading it. And we have some of his books on the table in the hall for purchase if you should like to do so. And Bill is a distinguished professor of history at the college, and I'm not sure if I'm positive about this, but medieval history and Dante, if any of you remember having to read Dante and struggle through it, which I did, this is Bill's forte, and he takes his classes and people sometimes to Italy. So we're really happy that he decided to become interested in our local history. So in our program, I must mention to you, and I'm not sure that I'm going to get this correct, our funding is through the New York State Council of the Arts, a decentralization grant, is that right? Oh, good. And it is administered by the Genesee Valley Council on the Arts, and we're very pleased to have the new director here. And she's in the front row, so do say hello to her tonight. So I will turn the program at this point to Jim, who will introduce the people that are performing with him. Where's Bill? Oh, another act.
I was supposed to remind you that if you all haven't already made a donation, we appreciate your doing so after or during the program, and we thank you for those of you who have already donated to our cause, and so we'll get the rest of you later. How's that?
And the introductions. And also something of an apology. I've had a significant cold this last week. It's one of the joys of having 150 students bringing papers in and that sort of thing. Bill sounds great. I don't. I can't sing much at all. I can hardly talk. But I have a couple of people that can behind me. Kimball, right behind me, not long ago retired from Kodak, but an active musician all his life on many instruments. He and I both play regularly at the Genesee Country Museum, among other places, and over in Cooperstown for their fall festival. So Dick Bowl from Fairport, New York will be here. And Karen Canning, who knows the Arts Councils well. She is also an ethnomusicologist and folklorist, officially of Orleans, Genesee, Wyoming, and Livingston County, putting on programming of various sorts, but also a fine musician. So glad to have them here tonight. And Phil Cook.
I've got to begin with a story. I hope you can all hear me without the microphone, can you? My students tell me I'm loud. In 1970, I applied for a job in Geneseo, New York, and got it. That tells you how much I knew about the place. And I moved here to Geneseo, and I learned to pronounce correctly, in August of 1970. And I had a whole month to get to know the place before my classes started. So I got out my almanac. I discovered that the biggest place in Livingston County is Dansville. So I hopped in my car to come visit this metropolis. I had to see the place that was bigger than even Geneseo. Well, I had a wonderful time. First of all, I did the smartest thing. I got a haircut on Main Street. So I know a lot about you folks, even though I didn't know your namesake. And then the guy said, well, you got to go look at the castle the year before it finally closed. So I got to see the castle. I called my mother and father up, from Indiana originally, and they didn't know where Geneseo was either. So I said, well, there's this place here that was run by Bernard McFadden. That did it. They knew I lived someplace, but they'd heard that. So I said, I think I'm going to like this place a whole lot, as it turns out. Well, I came in 1970, but the first white folks came in 1795, 175 years before I arrived and departed totally anonymously. They came to this wild land, built some houses, and settled in. They were Christian folks, almost all at the beginning Protestants of various sorts, Lutherans, Anglicans, Presbyterians, and some others. And since they were Protestants, they got to write their own music. Because at this time, of course, Catholics still sang only Gregorian chant. There's still a book out called Why Catholics Can't Sing. Long story. Protestants can. And they did. And they sang some old songs, and they sang some new songs. And they brought new words, new music, and new ideas all together in some of their performances. Not for show, but as part of their worship, as part of their settling in, founding Christian communities, and raising their children in that tradition on the frontier.
We have two songs here that come from this early era, the first sort of predating that first settlement, but was a tune that we suspect, we've got some evidence here, was known by people in Dansville. It's one of the old ballads. There were dozens of old ballads, many from the British Isles. Americans were starting to create some of their own. Brave Wolf, for example. extolling the virtues of heroes or villains. One that was quite well known back in those early days was the ballad of Captain Kidd, the pirate.
My name was Robert Kidd when I sailed. My name was Robert Kidd when I sailed. My name was Robert Kidd, God's laws I did forbid. So wickedly I did when I sailed. So wickedly I did when I sailed. My parents taught me well when I sailed. My parents taught me well when I sailed. My parents taught me well to shun the gates of hell, but against them I rebelled when I sailed. Against them I rebelled when I sailed. I murdered William Moore when I sailed. I murdered William Moore when I sailed. I murdered William Moore and left him in his gore, not many miles from shore as I sailed. Not many miles from shore as I sailed. I was sick and nigh to death as I sailed. I was sick and nigh to death as I sailed. I was sick and nigh to death, and I vowed at every breath to walk in wisdom's ways as I sailed. To walk in wisdom's ways as I sailed. My repentance lasted not as I sailed. My repentance lasted not as I sailed. My repentance lasted not, my vows I soon forgot. Damnation was my lot as I sailed. Damnation was my lot as I sailed. To execution dock will I sail as I sail. To execution dock as I sail. To execution dock will many thousands flock to see me bear the shock as I die. To see me bear the shock as I die.
One of the earliest Dansville artifacts I've run across is this book, Poems, Hymns, and Divine Songs, intended to illustrate the infinite wisdom, power, and goodness of God in the creation, redemption, and final restoration of all men, by Calvin Powell, Dansville, printed for the author 1832. And on page 230 we have, "To be sung to the tune of Captain Kidd, to be repeated in the same way as his song. Come every soul obey your great God, your great," you guys are gonna sing this. We're gonna do 4 verses. Both of these songs have 20 or more verses, right? They were designed to go on for a long time. But to the tune of Captain Kidd, come every soul obey.
great God, your great God. Come every soul obey your great God. Come every soul obey, nor from your Savior stray. Don't walk the downward way from your God, from your God. Don't walk the downward way from your God. Walk not the way that goes down to hell, down to hell. Walk not the way that goes down to hell. Walk not the way that goes down to darkness, death, and woes. For such will hellish foes, they must dwell, they must dwell. For such with hellish foes, they must dwell. All those who disbelieve in the word, in the word. All those who disbelieve in the word. All those who disbelieve will punishment receive, and none can then relieve but the Lord, but the Lord. And none can then relieve but the Lord. Praise ye the God of hosts, King of heaven, King of heaven. Praise ye the God of hosts, King of heaven. Praise ye the God of hosts, the Son and Holy Ghost. Through every land and coast, praise be given, praise be given. Through every land and coast, praise be given.
Jim, a question. Is that very similar to Shaker music?
There's no direct relationship with Shaker music, although the tune, some would know, it's in the modern Episcopal hymn book, I know, the tune is still used for a hymn that goes back to the same period called What Wondrous Love Is This? The form of which is generally considered as having been taken from Captain Kidd. And that's one of those old American folk hymns that one sometimes associates with other things, including Shaker.
From the beginning, the settlers in the southern part of Livingston County came from different parts of Europe. But here, especially more than in the north, came a lot of Germans. And they were largely German Lutherans first, although later German Catholics came as well. And of course, they brought a lot of things, not just their religion, but a whole culture that came from that part of the old world. It's still very much alive and well. I picked up today's paper, published by a fellow named Vogt, nice German name, and found the old photo of the week. Let me just read you one row of names from the class of 1925 at St. Mary's School. We've got a Mellenbacher, a Sword, a Fries, a Fleck. All German names. In fact, this town had such a reputation of being a German town that in 1902, the Roman Catholics who were German-speaking from all over New York had their convention here. They published a huge program in German, including the only surviving history of Dansville written in German. So this place has a lot of German heritage. It shows up in its German Lutheran church, its German Catholic church, but in every other facet of life as well.
The Germans certainly had their own hymns. The chorales, the Lutherans called them. One of them that they most certainly would have sung was the one written by Martin Luther. Ein fester Burg ist unser Gott, ein guter Wehr und Waffen. A song that wouldn't have not been found in a Catholic church back in those days. It was tantamount to a cry for Protestant victory over the Catholic Church. Things have changed. A great many of the old German chorales persist in Lutheran hymn books in America and Episcopalian and others. I know from talking with other Lutherans, my mother-in-law among them, Norwegian Lutherans, Danish Lutherans, they sometimes refer to the dancing Lutherans versus the non-dancing Lutherans. Some Lutherans were exceedingly strict. Jim Shaughnessy, son of Jim Shaughnessy, grandson of Jim Shaughnessy, who came to the canal here, came to the valley to work on the canal way back in the more than 100 years ago. He was Irish, lived out in short track surrounded by Germans. Said nobody would dance there. None of the girls would dance. He had to get out. He had to get out where the Irish were. Went over to Birdsall, the dance hall. That's where he'd go dancing. Or to Lamont or some other place. Those were the non-dancing Germans. But we have lots of descriptions in Dansville that talk about dancing going past. And in the marvelous newspapers of Dansville that are very gossipy, equally Nunday. They're two of the best papers for reading local popular history you can imagine back in the 1850s, 60s, 70s. Some of the early quotes are rather short. Dansville, 1861, February 14th, there was a German dance at Canasarega Hall Monday night. There was waltzing till dawn. The waltz was German. Germans were doing it long before the English, before it took Queen Victoria marrying a German prince, Albert, before the waltz became accepted in English society. The same year, 1861, a German party for the benefit of the new German string band of this place, which has for its conductor Professor C.F. Wirth, or Worth, and numbers 8 members. In the 1870s, we have a brilliant masquerade by the Café Krantchen, German Ladies Club of Dansville. Now this one's interesting. Music was furnished by the Italian band of Hornellsville and consisted of selections from Ernani, Martha, and the overture from Stradella. The program of dances, however, composed more especially of German waltzes, was well selected. And the leader of the Italian orchestra was Charlie Sedgwick from Dansville. They weren't Italians, they played Italian opera tunes as part of the program. So, and one of his musicians was Oberdorf. We're going to play two tunes. There's another point in one of the papers, I think it's the Geneseo paper, commenting on a German dance in Dansville and extolling the virtue of the fine old German waltzes, and especially the composers Gummel, Lahner, and Strauss, meaning the older Papa Strauss. We're going to do a waltz here by Lahner. It's just a nice, simple, easy. These were instrumental tunes, that's mostly what was played, but in the course of the century, by the end of the century, and especially into this century, German bands increasingly went to playing songs. Tunes with words. Walt Groller still does a handful of these old tunes. Some of them are easily traceable. We think of them as old German folk songs. This one written, the words by Heinrich Heine, music by Friedrich Zilscher, first published in Germany in 1859, and I bet it made its way to America very quickly. German was the second language of North America, at least the United States. And these tunes circulated here widely. Ich weiß nicht, was soll es bedeuten, dass ich so traurig bin. Ein Märchen aus uralten Zeiten, das kommt mir nicht aus dem Sinn. Anyone know the name of that tune? The Lorelei, and it talks about the old myth of the Lorelei and these magical maidens on the Rhine. And I've heard Walt Rowland do this tune in the past. Now, the Germans introduced more than that. All the piano makers in North America, the great majority, were Germans. Well into the 20th century, the national meetings of the Association of Piano Makers were held in German. The programs were in German, and that's what everybody spoke. Steinway, names like that. Germans were dominant in the music scenes. Buffalo and Rochester, 70–80% of the professional musicians were Germans. It was very much part of the language of things. Another instrument introduced significantly a little bit by French, a lot by Germans, and then by 1900 starting Italians as well was the accordion. Before the accordion, the harmonicas, the Mundharmonika. These are all made, the most famous company still today for harmonicas, Hohner, it's German, introducing things that became widely popular in North America. So I'll play the accordion for this tune here, the Lorelei. A good German Hohner accordion. For Dansville to thrive, you had to be able to get here, stuff had to be able to get here, had to be able to get out, and get stuff out. Well, as we know, that isn't always so easy. This is not the flattest part of the world. There's no big river that runs through here. And so, in that typical American way, we made one. And in the 1840s came the Genesee Valley Canal. It didn't go through Dansville. It sort of went to Saunier, turned the other direction. Nevertheless, some persuasion in Albany made it that there would be a spur down here to Dansville. It took 8 locks to get it here from Saunier to Dansville. But it didn't get right downtown. And that irked the downtown merchants, who sniffed out favoritism in the plan for this spur of the Genesee Valley Canal. And so they did the only sensible thing. They built a spur on the spur. And the state said, nice of you guys to do that. You can't open it. Hence the so-called Battle of Dansville, which of course is marked today by Battle Street. Well, depending on your point of view, the good guys won, and the spur to the spur was open. And Dansville became so important economically in this area because stuff could get in and stuff could get out. But you know, the Genesee Valley Canal never quite made it. It was going to link the Erie Canal with the Ohio River. So stuff from Dansville could have gone by boat all the way to the Caribbean.
and to Europe. It was not to be. Too many hills and a new competitor called the railroad. Even before the Genesee Valley Canal closed, Dansville got a railroad. More than one, in fact. And that allowed new industries to burgeon here. You guys still make heavy stuff in Dansville. One pizza went to China from Foster Wheeler, weighs 700,000 pounds. But long before that, the big thing to ship out was trees. Millions and millions of trees. And that took the railroad. Because, first of all, these were not local trees. The seedlings came from France. The stuff into which you put the seedling came from Madagascar. The moss came from the North Country, and the wood to build the crates came from out west. So the nursery industry was an international industry. But of course, too, the railroads have seen their day. You always wondered if Mr. Klink's name had been Gaston Chevrolet, whether this would be the Detroit, or rather, Detroit would be the Dansville of the United States. We wonder about the wise move of Mr. Klink naming his car the Klink. He built 20 of them, as it turns out. But we got the roads, and in 1911, only 8 years after Kitty Hawk, Dansville got the county's first airplane as well. Transportation has always been a story in Dansville, New York.
We're not going to sing any, we could sing Up in the Air about the airplanes, innumerable Tin Pan Alley automobile songs in My Merry Oldsmobile and things like that. A lot of train tunes, and we're going to do one of those. But referring back to the canal early on, I searched, I thought somewhere, and I still think somewhere, I saw a poem at one of the openings. And unlike the Erie Canal, right, the big one, that really had a well-defined grand opening when the Erie and the Hudson were alive. And they were celebrating all the way along from Buffalo to New York City and Albany. This one was opened up in little drabs. It took them almost 20 years or so before they got down to Olean where they were supposed to. And I think at that point they weren't celebrating anymore. There were small celebrations here and there. So the first significant one, September 1st, 1840, celebration at Mount Morris, included some 3 brass bands from Honeoye, the Nunde Valley Brass Band, and Rochester, attracted 3,000 to 4,000 people. Supposedly William Hosmer of Avon composed an ode for the occasion. I've not been able to find it. It's not in his complete works that I can tell, and maybe it wasn't very good, I don't know. Very erudite, perhaps very boring, I'm not sure. I'm still looking for it. We do have some toasts, a whole set of toasts. You have, look at all the men gather together and they take a drink and say something to somebody or other. Simply 3 of them here. To DeWitt Clinton, may the mingling of the waters of the Hudson and the Allegheny ere long make a jubilee to his memory. Took a long time. This was 1840. Late 50s before it was working. Another toast. To internal improvements, to Republican finance, expanding the people's money for the people's good. They were trying very hard to make this 1840 a major presidential campaign with a lot of hoopla was underway, right? The election coming up in November. So everything about the canal at that point was turned on political wheels. And a toast by General Mills of Mount Morris. To the Genesee Valley Canal, the outlet of the granary of New York, may it not prove an outlet to a public treasure. Which I think it did. One of the celebrations in Nunde had a colorful little descriptions of the Irish boys in town, presumably some of those who'd worked on the canal, who fired cannons, illuminated the streets with bonfires, etc., filling the air with deafening shouts as if all pandemonium was let loose upon us. And, quote, all the fiends from heaven that fell were shouting the banner cry of hell. Those were the Irish celebrating in Nunde. There was a canal joke that was published. Actually, this joke was widespread across America, I think. Suppose a canal boat heads west-northwest for the horse's tail and has the wind abeam with a flaw coming up in the south. Would the captain, according to maritime law, be justified in taking a reef in the stovepipe without asking the cook? kind of comical maritime jargon. The canal boats were always compared to the seafaring, storm-braving ships. The editor's answer, we should think it would depend a great deal on what they had for dinner on board. From the diary of Moses Long in York, New York, who was a member of York's first brass band in 1845, June 17th, spent the AM repairing drums and mowed my dooryard, prepared to go to Dansville with the band. Went to Spencerport, I believe that's Fowlerville today, with the bandwagon, took the down packet at 9 p.m., made the up packet at 11:30 p.m., got aboard for Dansville. Next day, June 18th, played at various places along the way, arrived at Dansville at 10 a.m., dined at Sleepers. I couldn't read that very well. Was there a Sleepers Hotel back here then? Or Heapers? One of those big capital letters, it's hard to read back then in the manuscript. And at 2 p.m. got aboard for York, played with the Dansville band, which came with us a mile or two and then left. Arrived at York at 9 in the evening. Father sheared sheep. We got 2 Dansville tunes, or 2 canal tunes here. The old-style string band had first fiddle, second fiddle, and cello most commonly. And the tune here is called the Erie Canal or the Grand Canal March, and was played when they opened the canal up in Rochester, and it remained in the brass band repertoire as late as the Civil War. So my guess is they might well have played this going up and down the canal here back then. Many songs that circulated in the music hall and minstrel stage environment, poking fun at the canal as well. A very not so old one, 1912, Low Bridge, everybody down. And the famous "The Uri is a-rising, the gin is a-getting low." These were music hall kinds of things. Some of them may have been sung. Here's a song. It's the only one I know collected here from oral tradition from somebody not that long ago, from Mark Hamilton, who lived down near Cuba, New York. And said, well, the old-timers used to sing this song, and they thought of the Genesee Valley Canal was the one they were thinking of. It's just one verse. It's all he remembered. He said, well, there was more, but he couldn't remember it anymore. So Erie Canal song, you want me to play it? Sure. Okay. I gave it to Dick and said, here, can you sing this? Here we're going to do, and it's one I know Dick knows because they play it commonly at the sessions up in Rochester. It has 2 or 3 different titles. One of them is Paddy on the Railway. And the Irish, of course, were not the only ones, but they were much associated with building canals and railways. A little later with the railway, equal associations were attached to Italians, and many an Italian family came to Western New York as railroad workers. Other parts of the country, lots of Chinese came to the country to work on railroads. And I'm sure there were a share of Germans that were working on the railroads too. This is simply, that was young men's work. It was readily available, hard work, but easy to get the job. So, Patty, well, let's sit down. We'll do an Irish style. Where they sit down. Rather than first fiddle and second fiddle, they tend to play the two in unison. It doesn't matter if you got a flute, a bagpipe, 2 or 3 fiddles, accordion, they're all just playing the tune in unison. And they don't hesitate to move their feet like that a little bit. There we go.
Was the minstrel group. There's a book out a few years ago called Way Up North in Dixie, which makes a remarkable claim that the tune Dixie was in fact originated by a black family in Ohio, stolen by a white guy who took it to New York, wrote different words and published it. I found this out because, being a historian, I'm kind of weird, and one day I was in the Warsaw Cemetery. And there was this African-American woman taking pictures of a grave to tell me the story. She said, well, that's my great-great-grandfather. He's related to the guy that wrote Dixie back in Ohio. In fact, we forget about the fact that while we shared with the rest of the country this minstrelsy that developed, this was a hotbed of abolition. The founder of the SPA, Dr. Jackson, was an ardent abolitionist. Frederick Douglass used to like to come here. Later on, Susan B. Anthony, who got her start in the abolition business as well. The Liberty Party, the only political party in the history of America founded with anti-slavery as its platform, was founded in Warsaw, New York, that hotbed of radicalism. So we sort of forget about the fact that in addition to this style of entertainment that was common everywhere, almost inevitably, some of that would be turned to the anti-slavery cause when it got to Western New York.
There were minstrel clubs active in this area as early as the late 1840s. Young men getting together. It was sort of the garage band, like the garage rock and roll bands in the 1950s, getting together and putting on these entertainments, putting on blackface and pretending or poking fun at whatever blacks. Some of them in sympathy, perhaps. I suspect they genuinely liked the music, or it never would have been as popular. And the shift in musical styles never stopped in America, as young white guys have never stopped copying black styles, musical styles. It's influenced language and fashion. And this started back in the 1840s, significantly with the beginnings of minstrelsy. Christie minstrels coming out of Buffalo, 1845, 46. Some of their leading musicians were Western New Yorkers. One of the well-known tunes, generally credited to Dan Emmett, the man who may have stolen Dixie, or wrote part of it, who did indeed come out of Ohio, was a white guy, wrote this tune, Old Dan Tucker, and it was one of the hits of the Virginia Minstrels when they opened up first in New York City. Dan Emmett later on his own toured back and forth, came through Livingston County at least a couple times, I found in the papers singing these songs. So a little bit of Old Dan Tucker. I bet I can sing the verse. I didn't think I could sing it at all, but I bet I can sing a verse if you guys sing the chorus. Chorus, you can sing along. The minstrel shows were distinguished in part by having a circle of men up on the stage, only 4 or 5 in the beginning, but by the 1870s and 80s, as many as 50 or 100 men up on the stage sometimes, singing the choruses. They gave Americans the desire to have a chorus at the end of every song, a sing-along part. Get out the way, yum bum bum bum. Get out the way, yum bum bum bum. Get out the way, old man Tucker, you're too late to get your supper. It's written down way back in the 1840s here. 1, 2, ready, go. Old man Tucker's fine old man washed his face in prime then and combed his hair with wagon wheels, died with a toothache in his heel. Now get out the way, get out the way, get out the way, old man Tucker, you're too late to get your supper. Now get out the way, get out the way, get out the way, old man Tucker, you're too late to get your supper. Old man Tucker and I got drunk and fell in the fire, kicked up and chucked, and a red hot coal fell in his shoe, and Lord almighty how the ashes flew. Now get out the way, get out the way, get out the way, old man Tucker, you're too late to get your supper. Get out the way, get out the way, get out the way, old man Tucker, you're too late to get your supper. Now we're going to do that. Banjos, of course, taken from black musicians, copied, imitated, developed in their own way. This is a banjo sort of going into the Civil War years, that type of instrument. That tune, widely publicized and perceived as being genuine black folklore. That's how the minstrels put themselves over. It's a little like early jazz musicians, too. No music stands, none of the trappings of learned stuff out there. This was folk music they were doing. Lots of white folks who didn't really like minstrelsy, the anti-slavery folks, looked askance at this kind of entertainment. And they thought they were taking a real black tune. They were, the Hutchinson family, Jesse Hutchins in particular, wrote a set of words to this that scandalized. His publishers wouldn't touch it. It's a little too hot in New England that relied so much on cheap cotton from the South. And that whole question of slavery was a no-no back in the 1840s, certainly, when one talked about it here. Hutchinsons became great favorites in Western New York, especially in Rochester. That was such a hotbed of anti-slavery activity. And this song, one of theirs, Get Off the Track. We're back to the railroad imagery. It's used for religion. The railroad to heaven. The gospel train is coming. Or in this case, the anti-slavery message. Ho, the car emancipation rides majestic o'er our nation, bearing on its train the story, liberty, and nation's glory. Yeah, you can tap that a little bit. You sing there? Ho, the car emancipation rides majestic through our nation, bearing on its train the story, liberty, and nation's glory. Roll it along, roll it along. Roll it along through the nation, freedom's car, emancipation. Roll it along, roll it along, roll it along. Nation, freedom's car, emancipation. Men of various predilections, frightened, run in all directions. Merchants, editors, physicians, lawyers, priests, and politicians. Get out the way, get out the way, get out the way. Every station, clear the track for emancipation. Get out the way, get out the way, get out the way. Every station, clear the track for emancipation. Politicians gazed astounded when at first our bell resounded. Freight trains are coming, tell these foxes, with our votes and ballot boxes. Jump for your lives, jump for your lives, jump for your lives, politicians, from your dangerous false positions. Jump for your lives. Jump for your lives, jump for your lives, politicians, from your dangerous false positions. All true friends of emancipation, haste to freedom's railroad station. Quick into the cars, get seated, all is ready and complete. Pull on the steam, pull on the steam, Pull on the steam, all are crying, and the liberty flags are flying. Pull on the steam, pull on the steam, pull on the steam, all are crying, and the liberty flags are flying.
In 1798, before there was a Mr. Richter to measure it, there was a small earthquake over on East Hill in Dansville, and water came out of the ground. It took a while, and in 1858, Dr. Jackson founded what became the Great Health Center. You know, every place seems to have its signature industry, and there were many in Dansville, whether it's boilers, or nurseries, or shoes, or beer, or the many other things that were manufactured. But ultimately, even today, at least we in northern Livingston County think, the main product here is health. And that's a long tradition going back to Dr. Jackson and the spa. Now I gotta tell you, I discovered this menu from up there. This is my kind of health spa. Let me read you this menu from sometime between 1910 and 1915. We start with Blue Points, Consommé Royale, mock turtle soup, salted almonds, shredded cucumbers, broiled salmon, marinière, potatoes Parisienne, fig fritters, Richelieu, cream chicken in ramekins. Not a clue what a ramekin is. Then came the mint sherbet. Then came the roast young turkey with cranberry sauce, the prime rib of beef, the baked ham espagnole, and the roast young pig with applesauce. Followed by baked potatoes, mashed potatoes, candy jams, spinach with egg, green peas, squash, Brussels sprouts, onions, and rice. Followed by macédoine of fruit au kirsch. Followed by mince pie, steamed fruit pudding, pumpkin pie, Lady Baltimore cake, Neapolitan ice cream, figs, glacé fruits, sweet cakes, and mince. Followed by assorted nuts, raisins, apples, Malaga grapes, oranges, tangerines, bananas. Followed by American and Roquefort cheese, crackers, and finally coffee. Now there's a health spa we can all agree to. Now, it was Christmas, but still. But certainly the institution here of the spa, and later on Bernard McFadden's famous health culture place. I'm sure you've all seen his statue in the museum, scantily clad and in gold. It's worth the price of admission to the museum if you haven't been there. But at any rate, it was a great cultural center. People came here to speak. This is what brought Clara Barton to Dansville. She came to rest and stayed 10 years. Not bad. It also brought entertainment. It brought the greatest vaudevillian of his time, Dr. Pauline, who met his wife, young Miss Kenny, when he was performing there and bought a house in West Sparta and probably became the most famous citizen of West Sparta in the 20th century. A lot of things went on. A lot of music, a lot of entertainment, a lot of lectures, and even a little exercise.
I just have one quote here before we head into the Civil War. From the Dansville Advertiser, March 30th, 1859. Another of those pleasant and agreeable evening parties for which our home, that's the castle, our home, is justly celebrated, took place on Friday evening last. A goodly number of young gents and maidens from the village were present, and all went merry as a marriage bell. Charlie has dignified his old fiddle box with the title of hydropathic medicine chest, and we believe it is a better remedy for 9/10 of the ills to which flesh is heir than the stuff we read about in the patent medicine advertisements. Charlie here was Charlie Sedgwick, barely 20 years old then. By 1865, he's the only man in Dansville in the census that declares himself a musician. He was the top musician in Dansville at that point. Or maybe not, there was another man we'll come to a little later, but he was the top fiddler and remained so for a good 20 or 30 years. Charlie Sedgwick, and here with his hydropathic medicine chest for a violin case as a better cure than much of the other stuff that one could buy.
Alas, our nation's never been at peace for too long at a time. We sent our men and women off to the Civil War and welcomed fewer of them back than went in 1865. In 1898, we sent our boys and our women off to fight in the Spanish-American War. The Red Cross chapter in Dansville got a hold of his old friend Clara Barton, who was living in Washington then, said, "What can we do?" And Clara said, "Can some preserves and make us some mosquito netting." And every week they met, 1 week mosquito netting, 1 week preserves, and it was a way where even though few soldiers went for a short war, every place in America, including Dansville, was involved. And then, of course, came World War I, and we sent our soldiers off on the war to end all wars. And again, not as many came home as went. On November 11, 1918, when the news arrived that Germany had surrendered, all over this area were impromptu parades, including one here in Dansville. The big formal celebration will be after the doughboys return. One of the floats, and I use that word loosely, had this inscription on the side. "Here's to the Kaiser, that big hunk of cheese. May the swell in his head go down to his knees. He broke his damn neck on the Hindenburg line and went to hell croaking the watch on the Rhine." It was tough for a city like Dansville, which had so many Germans, because there were those who feared whether or not they were completely loyal to the United States. It must have been painful for those who had memories and relatives. A few years ago, I was traveling in Buffalo. I was at a couple nursing homes, and I met a veteran of World War I in each of the 2 nursing homes. One fought for the Kaiser and later emigrated. One fought for the United States. When Jim Kimball talks about how German America was, it's important to remember that extra side of the painful quality of going to war against Germany.
Another celebrated musician who came to Dansville in the late 1850s, coming from Rochester, where he had established a successful career as a band leader. Alex Scott. Scott's band was well known in Rochester for some years. Came to Rochester with this advertisement in 1860, "Scott's Cornet Band, Dansville, New York." This celebrated band, composed of 15 excellent musicians, is now better prepared than ever before to execute all orders for music from military and civic processions, anniversary exercises, etc., etc. Address Captain Alex Scott, Dansville. Same paper has an ad for Alex Scott's restaurant on Main Street in Dansville. May 16, 1861. Our band has volunteered. Scott's band, all but 3 have volunteered. Monday Band did the same thing. Mount Morris Band might have done it too. All across New York State, whole village bands were signing up and marching off, hopefully as a band, but once they got in and the Army didn't need so many bands, their fate might change. Dansville Advertiser, May 30th, 14 days later, 1861, reports the band is at Elmira and consists of Alex Scott, David Scott, Ed Goodenow, J.W. Montagna, Robert Weissman, P.J. Oberdorf, John Hood, George Wilcox, T.F. Wood, D.S. Buck, C.D. Hess, E.G. Tiffany, C.W. Dipple, J.M. Newton, and L. Brown. Now, another young man who came to Dansville as a performer, born in Constantia, New York, James G. Clark. Came from the Syracuse area, but found a ready audience out here, played a small pump organ, a bit like the one we have here. He had performed in Boston some years before with a male quartet, and he wrote several songs for that. In fact, in 1859, he wrote a song dedicated to Dr. Jackson at our home, called The Beautiful Hills for male quartet. He stayed as a patient of Dr. Jackson. And I noticed at one point in the draft call, he was declared ineligible for the draft. He was living in Dansville throughout the Civil War. Composed many songs, some very poignant songs. And we're going to do one of those. The song is called The Children of the Battlefield. I have the old music it down here. You can look at it later. There's a very nice picture on the front of 3 children. And there's a story printed within the sheet music. After the Battle of Gettysburg, a dead soldier was found on the field, clasping in his hand an ambrotype of his 3 little children, but no other identification. The Presbyterian newspaper got a hold of the picture, reproduced copies of it, and printed it in papers across the country. They got an answer from Portville. It was Amos Humiston, the 154th New York Volunteers. James G. Clark wrote this song for the children of the battlefield.
Upon the field of Gettysburg, the summer sun was high, when freedom met her haughty foe beneath a northern sky. Among the heroes of the North, who swelled her grand array, and rushed like mountain eagles forth from happy homes away, there stood a man of humble fame, a sire of children 3, and gazed within a little frame their pictured form to see, and blame him not if in the strife he breathed a soldier's prayer. Oh, Father, shield the soldier's wife, and for his children care, and for his children care. Upon the field of Gettysburg, when morning shone again, the crimson cloud of battle burst in streams of fiery rain. Our legions quell the awful flood of shot and steel and shell, while banners marked with ball and blood around them rose and fell, and none more nobly won the name of champion of the free than he who pressed
was a pretty tired person at the end of the Civil War. And she didn't stop when the fighting stopped because she tried to find out where all those missing fellas were. And so she went to Europe on a kind of vacation forced upon her by her friends. And guess what? War broke out. And when the Franco-Prussian War broke out, there was Clara. This time when she got back, she was really tired. One more vacation like that would have killed her. So her friends sent her to the Jackson Spot. And in 1881, given what she'd learned when she was in Europe, she wanted to establish the American Red Cross. And her friends here in Dansville joined her. And chapter number 1 was and is in Dansville, New York. And boy, did we need the Red Cross in the Spanish-American War. Clara just happened to be in Havana Harbor when the Maine was blown up. And although Clara was dead, boy, did we need her in World War I. And the Red Cross that we so associate with care and mercy. Clara Barton, Dansville, New York.
We don't have any songs from Dansville about Clara Barton that I know of. I'd love to know if there are any. In fact, no songs whatsoever about Clara Barton, but we do have a few songs from the World War I era that was the absolute peak in the numbers of songs being published daily coming out of Tin Pan Alley. It was the peak of the number of pianos in American parlors and people who could really play them. My grandmother was in this generation. She'd look at the notes and she'd play in twice as many up there, and she'd been a nurse in World War I. Right, that generation. I got two songs here. Let's All Do Something, Uncle Sammy Wants Us Now, with a picture of a Boy Scout and a Red Cross girl on the cover. And the one we're going to sing takes a little different, lighthearted look, perhaps. World War I had sad, pathetic songs. It had patriotic songs over there, and a lot of funny songs. Stuff that would cheer the people at home. My Red Cross girlie, for you I'm calling, though you're many miles away. I'll play the piano down.
You want me to stay up here? Come down
Or you can come down here and sing it, it might be easier.
I'm going to bring this. Every Red Cross girlie likes a soldier. There's a feeling in her heart akin to love. Some laddie with the gun upon his shoulder very often is the one she's thinking of. Every soldier laddie has a yearning for some noble girlie all in white. In his heart the light of love is always burning for a little Red Cross girlie in the night. My Red Cross girlie, for you I'm calling, though you're
Among the funny songs coming out of World War I, we have Mademoiselle from Armentier. I brought my copy down here of The Old Gray Mare, She Ain't What She Used to Be. Kind of easy sing-along songs. Now here's one, I'm quite sure it's out of World War I. Still being sung in World War II. And I first learned it from the major of my battalion in the 1960s. It was still alive then among songs. You said you knew this song from somewhere or other. So we hope maybe some of you will know this and can sing along. Now you were going to possibly to refer to a beer company here in Dansville as well, right? We didn't quite get to that, but he said, do you know any songs about beer? And this is just the one that stuck in my head because it has this rousing end refrain there. Beer, 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 said the privates. Merry, merry men are we. Anyone know that song out there? See if you can catch it. It's like 12 Days of Christmas. It starts out with the privates and works up to the generals, and even the chaplain if we get that far. And always comes back to the privates and the beer. Okay. My voice will last all the way through the privates. Probably won't. So. Old King Cole was a merry old soul, and a merry old soul was he. Old King Cole was a merry old soul, and a merry old soul was he. He called for his pipe, and he called for his bowl, and he called for his privates 3. Beer, 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 cried the privates, merry, merry men are we. There's none so fair as can compare with the king's artillery. Old King Cole was a merry old soul, and a merry old soul was he. He called for his pipe, and he called for his bowl, and he called for his corporals 3. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, said the corporals. Beer, 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 said the privates. Merry, merry men are we. There's none so fair as can compare with the king's artillery. Old King Cole was a merry old soul, and a merry old soul was he. He called for his pipe, and he called for his bowl, and he called for his sergeants 3. Right by squads, by right, said the sergeants. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, said the corporals. Beer, 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 said the privates. Merry, merry men are we. There's none so fair as can compare with the king's artillery. Old King Cole was a merry old soul, and a merry old soul was he. He called for his pipe, and he called for his bowl, and he called for his shavetails 3. We do all the work, said the shavetails. Right by squads, by right, said the sergeants. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, said the corporals. Beer, 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 said the privates. Merry, merry men are we. There's none so fair as can compare with the king's artillery. Old King Cole was a merry old soul, and a merry old soul was he. He called for his pipe, and he called for his bowl, and he called for his captains 3. We want 30 days leave, said the captains. We do all the work, said the shavetails. Right by squads, by right, said the sergeants. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, said the corporals. Beer, 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 said the privates. Merry, merry men are we. There's none so fair as can compare with the king's artillery. Old King Cole was a merry old soul, and a merry old soul was he. He called for his pipe, and he called for his bowl, and he called for his majors 3. Bring my boots and spurs, said the majors. We want 30 days leave, said the captains. We do all the work, said the shavetails. Right by squads, by right, said the sergeants. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, said the corporals. Beer, 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 said the privates. Merry, merry men are we. There's none so fair as can compare with the king's artillery. Old King Cole was a merry old soul, and a merry old soul was he. He called for his bowl, he called for his bowl, and he called for his colonels 3. The army shot to hell, said the colonels. Bring my boots and spurs, said the purpose. We want 30 days leave, said the captains. We do all the work, said the shavetails. Right by squads, by right, said the sergeants. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, said the corporals. Beer, 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 said the privates. Merry, merry men are we. There's none so fair as can compare with the king's artillery. Old King Cole was a merry old soul, and a merry old soul was he. He called for his pipe, and he called for his bowl, and he called for his generals 3. Shine my goddamn boots, said the generals. The army shot to hell, said the colonels. Bring my boots and spurs, said the majors. We want 30 days leave, said the captains. We do all the work. Right by slots, said the sergeants. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, said the corporals. Beer, 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 said the privates. Merry, merry men are we. There's none so fair as can compare with the king's artillery. Old King Cole was a merry old soul, and a merry old soul was he. He called for his pipe, and he called for his bowl, and he called for his chaplains 3. Praise the Lord, that's all, said the chaplains. On my goddamn boots, said the generals. The army shot to hell, said the colonels. Bring my boots and spurs, said the majors. We want 3 days leave, said the captains. We do all the work, said the ship tails. Right by squads, by ranks, said the sergeants. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, said the corporals. Beer, 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 said the privates. Merry, merry men are we. There's none so fair as can compare with the king's artillery.
In the 20th century, we kept inventing things to make life a little bit easier. In the home, in the field, and in the factory. What do we do with all that leisure time? More time to get out, more time to do things, more time for entertainment. One of the kinds of things that people did in Dansville and around the nation was to join organizations. 1902. Let me read you a few of the organizations you could have joined. Some men, some women, no mix. You could have been, if I can find the right page now, when you left your Bloom Shoe Factory job or whatever, you could have belonged to the Ancient Order of Hibernians. Better be Irish. Or the United Workmen, the Catholic Mutual Benefit Association, the Catholic Relief and Beneficiary Association, the Empire Knights of Relief, the Masons, the Independent Order of Odd Fellows. Or you could belong to Tribe 372 of the Improved Order of Red Men, who dressed up as Indians and fought battles. Guess who won? You could have been a Knight of the Maccabees. Or a member of the Ladies' Catholic Benevolent Association. Or the Dansville Hive of the Lady of the Maccabees. You could have been a Modern Woodsman of America. Or belong to the National Protective League. Or the Protective Home Circle, or the Dansville Grange, or the Royal Arch, or the Royal Templars. Or you could have gone to a dance hall, and you could have enjoyed all the kinds of new entertainments that were taking place at the beginning of the 20th century.
We're down to just the last couple tunes here. Dance music's what we do the most of, and I've done a lot of looking into those old papers. Before the 20th century, the 1870s, especially 1880s, one gets the feeling that there were some young folks that must have been going out dancing 2 or 3 times a night here in Dansville. Just a couple random notices here. I read the one already from our home. 1879, January 2nd, and the winter was the prime time for these parties. Quite a pleasant dance was enjoyed at the Eagle Hotel Hall at the foot of Canal Street Monday evening by a number of young gentlemen and ladies of the village. There were 20 couples present, and music was furnished by Sedgwick, Oberdorf, MacArthur, and Gilliam. Gilliam played second fiddle. MacArthur from Mount Morris played the cornet. Or this one, there was an impromptu masquerade at the residence of Arch Lemon last Thursday. David Sweet and Adam Gilliam furnished the music for dancing, and pedestrians going by in the early morning could hear them sawing away in their fiddlers as if the dancing had just begun. And this one, I've read this here before, but it's such a good quote. From the Dansville Advertiser, February 1st, 1877. Friday evening last, a party of 24 young ladies and gentlemen seated themselves in a huge sleigh box on a pair of bobs and started for Mount Morris in merriest mood. Arriving at Mount Morris at 8:30, they stopped at the Eagle Hotel, and half an hour afterwards were enjoying one of Mr. Scoville's best suppers, and at 10 commenced keeping time with dancing feet to the good music of Sedgwick's fiddle, assisted by MacArthur and Chilson of Mount Morris. They were assisted in this delightful amusement by another sleighing party from Geneseo. The dancers were not ready to start for home until 4 a.m. Saturday and looked somewhat weary when they rode into Dansville at 7. And the other paper in town reports that sleighing party which went from Dansville to Mount Morris one night last week had an elegant time at the Scoville house. One of the party, he who wears the big black mustache, it is said, kissed a Mount Morris girl so suddenly that she went out of the room for a moment to blush. We're going to do 2 tunes. This one we guess was probably taught here in the 1890s. There was always a dance master from the pioneer days on. Every generation had its own dance master. Some were good, some not so good. Some were upright, some not so upright. One that was quite popular in town in the 1890s was Daniel Kingston House, Canasarega, New York. Irish immigrant family. Related to the Kingstons that are prominent up around the town of Geneseo still today, not directly from Daniel, who eventually moved off to Vermont, I think. But he taught dancing for about a decade here, and he published a little book in Canasarega in the 1890s, a how to dance book. One wonderful little aside in the book, he has this, I've never seen it anywhere else, and with the etiquette, he comments, if you should happen to stumble while waltzing, stop and pretend to tie your shoe. This feint, if it worked well, will save you a great deal of embarrassment. Arthur Murray never taught that trick. One of the dances he teaches in the book is the crooked-S. One of the long ways dances, along with the Virginia reel, the opera reel, money musk, these were all still being done into the last century, into the 1910s and 20s. Here's the crooked-S, old style, first fiddle, second fiddle, and cello. And an old-time waltz tune. James Scanlon wrote this. He was Irish-American, toured with Irish-American shows out of New York City. There were plenty of those. The show was called Peekaboo, 1879, 1880, and the hit song was called Peekaboo. Had a little chorus, Peekaboo, I see you, and it was cute. Shirley Temple, 80 years before Shirley Temple. The Peekaboo waltz. And we're going to end up with this. Thank you so much for having us all here. Thanks to Bill Cook. Thanks for inviting us to be part of the Dogwood Festival concert this year. Dick Bolt, Karen Canning, I'm Jim Kimball, and here's the Peekaboo waltz. Little room in the aisles here, so we want to.
Well, certainly those of you who came in here tonight, not knowing quite what happened, are very pleased. I know I have never attended one I've enjoyed as much as this group has put on for us tonight. So we thank them very much, and we wish them much success in the future. And on the way out, a couple of our people will have a basket there. If you wish to contribute something, fine. Please do feel free to do so. Thank you and good night.